What's up guys, Freezy here. I'm finally back from Christmas and it is time to finish the ship review for the new year. I'm trying out a new format and it should be more concise, so let's start right away with the new gears. First up, we got the Sky Raider, a new Rainbow Tier dive bomber. It drops 1 bomb and 8 rockets per aircraft, and it deals insane damage. The damage output against light and medium armor is the highest in all dive bomber. Only against heavy it will on average perform a bit worse than Tenrai, so make sure to grab it from the event. It is the most important thing to get in this event besides Yorktown 2. The only problem with this one is it is very slow, so I recommend using the homing beacon gear with this one. The other new aircraft is the Hellcat with rockets. It drops 6 rockets per aircraft, and the rockets are the same ones from Sky Raider. It deals great damage against light armor only, and honestly it is not very good. Currently carriers are not the best against light armor. Normally we use battleships for that. If you already have a few plus 13 BF-109s, it does roughly the same amount of light armor damage as plus 10 Hellcat, so no need to go all out and farm for this one. But the Eagle Union carriers do have this anti-light armor theme going on. So if we ever get another ultra rare carrier from the USS faction, the Hellcat could be the top choice sometimes. So farming a few extra copies for building a future USS carrier fleet is not a bad idea. Now let's get into the ultra rare ship, Yorktown 2. Her skill set is fairly simple. Skill 1 provides a small anti-air debuff to the enemy, which roughly translates to 2 or 3% aviation damage boost depending on enemy AA. She has a self-heal, and barrage requires using 1 Eagle Union aircraft to trigger. Skill 2 is a stats boost that requires 2 or more Eagle Union ships in the same fleet, and it has a cross-fleet barrage. Skill 3 is where Yorktown 2 gets interesting. When she uses airstrike, it lowers the airstrike cooldown of other Yorktown class or SX class carrier in the fleet. So if you have Yorktown 2 launch first, the other carriers from the said class will immediately launch airstrike with her due to the cooldown reduction. So it pretty much automatically synchronizes airstrike for you if Yorktown launches first. This is obviously very good for boss fights and gives the USS carrier fleet more options on using slower aircrafts. But if Yorktown 2 is the last one to launch, she will make the other carriers launch sooner, which is pretty good for mob fleet. But overall, Yorktown is more meant to be a boss killer, and if you pair her with other USS carriers, the goal is to have her launch airstrike first. Now let's take a look at her barrages. Yorktown Skill 1 launches 3 additional Sky Raiders. These do a lot of damage to light and medium armor and makes her very good at killing bosses. Skill 2 does this Flower Barrage. The barrage has 1040 base damage, so not very good. It is mainly there to clear trash mobs. It is pretty good for killing things like suicide boats. This barrage is also the cross-fleet barrage. So Yorktown 2 has an interesting aircraft setup. Her second slot is the strongest, so you definitely want to have the best aircraft there. And slot 3 can use all types of aircraft. This means she can adapt to different situations by using specific aircrafts. And also keep in mind that she needs at least 1 Eagle Union aircraft to trigger her first skill. So if you are lazy, just have the Sky Raider on her all the time is a good idea. Now let's look at different loadouts against different armor types with the DPS numbers. The most impressive thing about her is the damage against light armor, which is over 2.8k. This is the highest in the carrier category, but top tier battleships do about 3k DPS, so she is still a bit behind. For medium armor, she pretty much breaks even with Shinano and Hakuryu, and due to rockets being consistent, she is the better solo option if you want to run one carrier against medium armor. Against heavy armor, well, she kinda sucks, but that's to be expected. Her skill and gear setup isn't geared towards heavy armor anyways. So in conclusion, Yorktown 2 is very strong. Definitely a top tier carrier at the moment. Her skill design reminds me a lot of Shinano. She is kind of the archetype foundation for the USS carrier fleet. Although currently we don't have another Eagle Union UR carrier to pair with Yorktown 2, her solo performance is already good enough to clear all contents in the game. Eventually she will get some worthy partners, and we can see her full potential then. The two things you gotta watch out for when using Yorktown 2 is that, first, she needs one Eagle Union aircraft equipped, and ideally you want to have 2 or more Eagle Union ships with her to trigger her stats buff. Next up we got Hornet 2, the new SX class carrier who is actually very similar to SX. Her skills are also very simple. Skill 1 does extra barrage on airstrike. Skill 2 is a stats boost with no fleet comp condition required, and Skill 3 is a self-boosting defensive skill. So she is a good solo performing ship regardless of the fleet composition. Like usual, there is a translation error on Skill 3. It only makes Hornet 2 invulnerable to ramming damage. Her teammates will still take ramming damage, so it is kind of useless actually. For Hornet 2, I really don't have a lot to say. Her performance is very identical to other SX class carriers, although a bit better due to her first skill having rockets, which makes her a better boss killer somewhat. The standout for Hornet 2 is definitely her fighter slots. Having 3 fighters with 155 efficiency is pretty good. Use a fighter with good anti-air gun, and she can contribute a lot to the fleet's anti-air power. Other than that, her boss damage is a tiny bit better than Enterprise, and she can get buffed by Yorktown 2, but either way, her DPS is nowhere close to the ultra rare level. So overall, a pretty strong ship for beginners, especially in chapter 12 and 13. But veterans with UR carriers have no real reason to use her either. Next up is Northampton 2. This one is a bit of a surprise. Her first skill fires barrage and makes one enemy take more damage from Vanguard cruisers. This should already tell you she is more geared towards the boss fleet. Skill 2 is a stats boost and more bonus if the flagship is a carrier from the USS faction. Skill 1 Barrage is pretty weak. It deals 360 base damage, and the armor modifier is the standard normal shell. Its main purpose is to debuff the enemy and makes them take 10% more damage from Vanguard cruisers. Skill 2 Barrage is quite interesting. It fires only when your flagship carrier launches airstrike, and it slows by 50% if the carrier is from the Eagle Union faction. The bullet speed is really fast, it ignores shields, and the bullet have delayed lock-on, which is extremely accurate. So this is basically a guaranteed slow, and you don't even need to time the airstrike with it, it automatically times itself. Needless to say, this barrage is amazing. Absolutely top tier support for Eagle Union carrier fleet. Now let's check out her numbers. Northampton 2 has very impressive damage, breaking 1k single target DPS against light armor. This is pretty much ultra rare tier DPS, very close to Drake actually. When you factor in the slow boosting carrier damage, she is one of the best ship in the game. Her survivability is pretty average, around 14k effective HP against bosses, definitely not a main tank material. Thankfully Eagle Union has many Vanguard survivability boosts, so she will do fine as the secondary tank, and can be main tank in specific setups. Overall, very good ship, a lot stronger than most super rare heavy cruisers nowadays. I do think the Eagle Union carrier fleet is gonna be meta, and the foundation we have here with Northampton 2 and Yorktown 2 is just too good. So I say this is a must-get ship. Next ship is Hanuman 2, another surprisingly strong ship. Her first skill is 2 skills combined into one. It has the effect of both air raid assistance and flagship cover. It does not stack with those 2 skills, but 2 skill into 1 is just pure power creep. Skill 2 gives her a nice anti-air boost and some damage reduction with shooting down aircrafts, so both skills are good. But it doesn't stop there. Hanuman 2 gets 1 extra anti-air gun base and a special anti-sub weapon on limit break, so it's kinda like having 2 extra gear slots. This makes her one of the most broken utility ship in the game. While her effective HP is a typical DD, thanks to her Eagle Union faction, she gets a lot of survivability support. And she can use the repair team, so the low effective HP is kind of okay. It's really kind of insane how much she provides to the fleet. Her anti-air is amazing, and anti-sub is really top of the game, so she's great in both Chapter 13 and 14. Flagship cover is also an amazing skill for Chapter 13 and 14, not to mention the carrier damage boost. The only downside to Hanman-2 is her slow movement speed. Some bosses like Arizona Meta requires the Vanguard to have a certain amount of speed, but those cases are rare. Overall, Hanman-2 is a super rare ship. She is better than most super rare DDs out there, and it's kinda crazy that she's an elite. Lastly, we got Langley 2. This is the only Type 2 ship that I think is worse than the original. Her stats are much higher than the original, but she loses 2 aircrafts, and her EXP boosting skill is gone. Now she has 2 mediocre damage boosts with her subpar stats. So yeah, she's kinda bad, not really worth using. And that's it for this video. Christmas was kinda hectic for me this year, but I'm glad to try out this new format of ship reviews. I'd like to know what you think about the new format in the comment section. Thanks for watching and have a happy new year everyone.